everybody and introduce myself. My name is Susanne Murphy, and I've been with Color Energy for 26 years. And as well, I have been doing aura readings for about as long, and for the past 20 plus years I have been using the Biopulsar-Reflexograph as my main tool of analysis. And today what we're doing is we're doing a group study of a person's energy, and this person's information was forwarded to me by a couple people that are online with us today, Stacy and Cheryl. So you might be hearing them give me some feedback or give us some feedback on this person as we're starting to decipher this person's energy. But I want to go into, talking about this person's energy dynamic. And as we progress with the reading as a group, then I've got the client's intake form. So I've got some information about the client that I'll bring to the forefront if somebody mentions something. But when I started doing readings, I didn't have any client intake information. I had no idea who they were. I probably did about 5,000 to 10,000 readings initially in my first several years because I did a lot of events. And when I was doing events, I would just be doing a reading of people one after another. And I wasn't at that point wanting to develop a business because I do work for Color Energy full time. So therefore, I was just doing readings to introduce the color concept and to introduce the biopulsar to the world. So my job was just to do a lot of readings and teach people about their aura and chakra, and of course, like I said, introduce people to Color Energy and the Biopulsar. So a lot of my readings were just based on what I saw. I didn't know anything about the physicality, and that's one of the things I always tell everyone. When I first started doing aura readings, I knew very little about the chakras, and I knew nothing about the physical connection. Everything that I have learned is based on my work with the Biopulsar. And sometimes people say that I have as much knowledge as a doctor. Well, again, after you've done 20,000 scans, you learn a lot and people share a lot of information. So thank you everyone for joining and allowing me to introduce myself and a little bit about what I do. And we're just going to move forward here to the Biopulsar reading. So the first thing that I like to start out with is looking at a person's chakra flow. And there's a lot of different ways that we can deduce a person's energy flow. And with the Biopulsar, it makes it really easy because we can see here that right away we can see this client's energy flow from the heart chakra being the weakest at 13 and the strongest being the crown, followed by the brow at 55. Now you'll notice that the numbers are all under 60. The optimal level using our technology is 65%. Between 50 and 70 is what we refer to as the normal range, but you can see that this individual here is resonating at a lower frequency. And so we can make some assessment based on that. So, and because this is a group analysis, I want you guys now to start participating and letting me know based on the chakra flow what you can deduce from this individual.
Well, I see on the throat chakra that this person does not speak up.
Correct.
This person's not verbal, and they hold their words in their throat.
Correct.
And I'm looking at all of the physical chakras, and I would think that this person is just absolutely exhausted. I mean, physically, they are just, they're wiped out.
Yeah, absolutely. And Carolyn is referring to the fact that at the 5 lower chakras, they're the root, the sexual or sacral chakra, solar plexus, heart, and throat. As soon as we hit the brow and crown, then that is our more esoteric chakras. They don't have as much of a connection to the physicality. So Carolyn was absolutely right in saying that below from the throat down, those chakras are weaker. What else can we surmise?
With that holding in for 2 reasons, not just the low throat chakra, but also the rectum reading.
Yes. Yes, and we can bring in other aspects of the scan for sure, because we can understand that you know, there's a lot of organs and glands that are weaker, which is a projection of what's going on in that chakra. And again, let's even pinpoint further the heart, because when the heart is weak, we can then also understand that this person is not free flowing in their emotional communication. Can we agree with that?
Mhm.
Absolutely. With the heart chakra being 13, and where again it should be between the 50 and 70 range at the very, you know, at the very most, we can see that they're 37 degrees away from a healthy heart chakra. And if we look at some of the features of the heart chakra, what are some of the connections we can make to the heart chakra?
Yeah, you can try now.
Hey, Suzanne, it's Diana and Dan. We're here for the first time.
Wonderful. Thanks for joining. So we're talking about the heart chakra. The heart chakra is at 13%. So what does that mean? That indicates that that person's heart center is not wide open. So what could be the challenges that this person faces?
Well, I was wondering if they've had lung issues, if they've been sick recently, and they're really disconnected. I don't know if they've had a death in the family or anything like that, because if you look at the top of the head, they're also not here mentally either.
Correct. So we can absolutely deduce that. And Diane, Diana is one of the first Biopulsar owners that purchased the system, 20 years ago now?
Yes.
18,000.
So she's got a lot of experience in aura reading. So when I look at the basics of the heart chakra, we know that relationships, self-love, and love towards other is at a minimal. You know, we can also deduce that you know, this person blocks their emotions, and absolutely we could look at if they've disconnected from people in life, or if people have actually died in their life. Okay, so it can be, you know, on both levels, where they've had a lot of loss in their life, or that they've disconnected from a lot of people in their life, whether it's by choice or they've just alienated themselves from other people. Okay.
Mhm.
And he has, yes.
Can
Okay.
I add, Susanne, as well?
Pardon?
Can I add as well?
Absolutely, please.
So what I'm seeing also is that the shoulder and the armpit as well, so carrying life's burdens on the shoulders, but also, as you were just mentioning about maybe not connecting with others, if there's, you know, a lymphatic detox happening from the armpit on a physical level, could be also be releasing things that, you know, cutting ties and releasing things that no longer serve you as well.
Absolutely. You know, and when people go through any kind of detox, we will see a lot of lower vibrations come in. So this is where the dialogue with the client would come in, where you might be asking them, have you been disconnecting from people? Have you been getting rid of people in your life that are negative? Because we do see, because of the gray in the brain, that this person also has negativity. So is that negativity combined because of the people in their life, or is it other reasons? So this is where we can engage the client and, you know, try to learn more about their circumstances. Now, Cheryl and Stacy, please pipe up, because you know this client better than any of us do.
Yes.
So I heard one of you mention that this guy was disconnected from people.
I don't know.
He has a lot of personal things historically that have happened
You used to smoke.
that have turned him into the person that he is, I guess. He had found out that he had had a child, had no idea, and the boy is like 15 years old now,
Mm-hmm.
and he always wanted a boy, and
Right.
he never knew about it until just recently. And since then he had another child, but a girl.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he has a lot of like history with being unfaithful, the guilt, I wish Stacy was on here. Something must be wrong with her connection. But it's her close friend.
Right.
He's had a lot of, something has happened in his history, and she's pretty sure that it might be related to sexual abuse
Mm-hmm.
in the church.
Right.
And he won't go into detail about it. And Stacy keeps telling him that he really needs to speak about it with someone, whether it be her or somebody else. He needs to start opening up. And I might have taken this scan of him because she didn't want him to think that she was partial and coming up with things. So I said, look at that heart chakra number. And that's the first time I even looked at it, really. Yeah. I said, well, that's really low. That's saying something. And he kidded around saying, well, I don't have a heart. I'm like, oh, stop it. But yeah, he's very afraid to let out all his feelings. He's been holding in things for years, and he can't figure out. He works out like he's cyclist. He's a cyclist. Right. He exercises like crazy. He thinks, he's like, I don't know what's going on, why I don't feel well. And he's run down, and it's like, we tell him, maybe you're pushing it too much. Yeah. You're trying to compensate for it, which, you're overdoing it. Yeah. And we'll talk a little bit about the physicality shortly, but it's the emotional side of things, because every single person that I have come across that has had heart issues where they've had triple bypass surgeries or other major surgeries of the heart, all of them had frequencies below 17% in the heart chakra. So if this is somebody who's stifling a lot of emotions, then you can see why we're seeing that dull orange combined with that surrounding gray. Because that is indicating somebody who is blocking their emotions. Their emotions are not free flowing, and sometimes it can be momentarily. And that's why, it's exciting when we can do 2 to 3 scans, because then we can formulate patterns. But even from the initial scan, I would have agreed with Diana that, this is somebody who obviously has suffered some tragedy. And imagine somebody who found out that they had a 15-year-old son and had no history of that before that. That to me, that could be a grieving process in itself, knowing that you miss 15 years of your child's life. Right. So we could definitely understand that, there is that possibility. And because of the fact you even validated that his throat chakra, that he wasn't using his throat chakra to communicate his emotions, then again, we can understand why the heart is being stifled, because the ability to communicate is very weak. And all the chakras are not supporting. And when we look at the fact that the crown and the brow are the highest, we could even deduce that this person lives more in their imagination than in reality, and even though they're doing cycling and some other physical activities, that's probably what's keeping them alive more than anything. Right. And now we're going to move to the aura reading, because now we can then start to also make a picture of, this person's energy and what could be going on. So I always look at the color that comes from the crown chakra, and right away we see gray. So from that, what can we make of that?
I think looking at the oral photo, I would tell this client that I would ask them if they have been having any very negative thoughts lately. But absolutely, with all the white that's surrounding it, because my main thing is, I remember the young lady that I had as a client, and I must have done like 12 readings on her. And when she first came to me, her mother said she believed that she was Oprah Winfrey's best friend. And there was so much white and gray in her crown. It was unbelievable. And, because she was living she was living in this world where she was just imagining all these things, and to her they were real. And that's what I would this gentleman, I would think, is having that same issue. He's literally living in a make-believe world. It's part of a make-believe world, but his emotions are just, he's also very angry. I mean, I'm not angry, but he's also having a lot of negative thoughts along with it.
Absolutely, absolutely. And whenever we see that gray, because we can see that it's in more areas than just one part of the brain, and because it's coming right from the cerebrum, this is their current thoughts. This is what they're sort of projecting into the future as well, because your thoughts create your reality. And we can see that the pineal gland, and I'm just scrolling down here, the pineal gland as well is weak, and so to have the brain frequencies in a weakened state, people don't have clarity of thought. And one of the things I recognized, even with myself, when I was going through a bit of a trying time, I definitely saw gray in my brain. And, when you have that gray in the brain, it is a bit of a denial energy. And it's like, oh, it's not that bad. But what I realized is when I converted that gray back into color, where there was more life force in my brain, I could look back and actually say to myself, wow, you know what? I wasn't so positive. I wasn't as sharp. My memory wasn't as acute. But when we're in that, trauma, drama, or, the absence of energy, we don't always realize that. And sometimes I tell people, the best thing you could do is talk to a really good friend and ask them, their opinion of, do I seem a little bit more disconnected lately or unhappy? I do reality checks, and my mom is great because she's always, honest with me. And so I ask her, like, has my attitude been good? Because sometimes, I yak it up with my mother, and I might talk about things that are going on in my life. So she's my sounding board, and I just want to make sure I'm not always, on that negative side. Because again, sometimes we have to understand when we're negative, how we can see the light. So with this person, there's just too much gray going on in the brain. But as Carolyn said, we're also seeing a lot of white in the brain. We see it in the forehead, the temporal, and the back brain, which could extend into, daydreaming, or, again, believing that you're more spiritual minded than, how other people would perceive you. And the struggle between the gray and the white is quite strong.
Suzanne,
Mm-hmm.
I also noticed that he's probably not sleeping very well.
Yes. And we could deduce that because the pineal gland energy is gray. Whenever we see that pineal gland in gray, we know that that person does not have good sleep habits. Now, he checked off that he actually has, where did I see it? 6 to 8 hours sleep. However, I don't think that it is optimal sleep. And this is where you have to probe and ask questions. And Cheryl, you're shaking your head there. So can you share some input?
He doesn't get good sound sleep.
Yes.
He's a restless sleeper. And it just could have to do with his emotions eating away with him.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, honestly, I think it doesn't stop.
Yeah.
I think that's what he's riding away from, like trying to, Yeah.
Yeah. And we have to remember, when we have those repeating thoughts, it will start to vibrate that frequency, whatever level it's at. And we can see that because there are some brain parameters that are gray, that this is just not, necessarily this moment. It could be something that is continual. Mm-hmm. And another thing that I note is the yellow is the top color. I call it the umbrella color. And the reason why I want to address that is because this person with the yellow that's sort of on top is indicating to me that they have a lot of self-control. And when I see that self-control, it's somebody that can, again, repress their emotions. They may think better of themselves than what other people may see of them, because that ego energy, you know, is that frequency that, you know, is indicating somebody that, you know, again, has a lot of knowledge, and they might see themselves in a different light than how other people perceive them. And
You're
we can
right
see,
on the dot.
yeah,
Yeah,
and
totally.
thank you. Yeah, and that turquoise is somebody who's caring. There's no doubt about it. This person has that potential to, you know, be a caring and you know, nurturing person. But again, if that yellow supersedes, that can block a lot of mental control.
Absolutely.
Okay.
He doesn't divulge anything, and he keeps a lot to himself, and he told Stacy, "I'm going to talk to you about this." And she was so excited. She thought maybe he was going to, and he never, I just think he's too scared.
Yeah. Well, one of the hardest things to do is talk to someone you know.
Right.
So talking to someone you don't know is a lot easier, because I know when I do readings of strangers, they're open. Versus when I do family and friends, they'll go, "Oh, that's not me." And you're going, "Yeah, it is. You know, I've known you long enough. I know what you're like." So again, sometimes it's easier to talk to somebody who's a stranger. So he might feel more comfortable talking to you than Stacy, right?
I did suggest that.
Yeah.
I did. So she thinks that we're going to, because he does want to continue, which is a good sign.
Yeah. Well, he's desperate right now because, again, he understands he's bottling all these emotions, and we've got to let them out, because this is what I would consider a prime candidate of a heart attack.
He did have a procedure. I don't know if it was a catheterization. I had no idea. And she told me not too long ago. I was like, really? Because he just seemed so, you know, but I think it's because his heart's breaking and aching. That's.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And I'm just looking here if he had noted any of that, and I don't see anything along that line. But yeah, absolutely, that would be something that you might want to probe a little bit more at. Okay. And also, one of the things that I'll do when I see that yellow in the brain, especially as that umbrella color, I will actually say to the individual, "You're very guarded," because that yellow is that ego. So this tells me that you may not want to be forthright with me. And it's getting past that, because I tell everyone, this isn't a right or wrong situation. This is about your energy. And if you want to improve your energy dynamics, then, you know, we have to have that open line of dialogue. And I look for people who have their arms crossed, because often when they have their arms crossed, then again, that's that protection of the heart. And look at their heart center and see whether or not, you know, look at that heart center and see whether their heart is concave. Because often when people deny the emotions, their shoulders start to roll forward and their chest goes inverted. Okay, so I don't know if you noticed anything, Cheryl, with him in regards to his posture.
He doesn't stand up the way he should, but better than me, I should say. But yeah, he does tend to concave, like little cave in kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, when we look at the overall aura, we're seeing predominantly that buried orange, because that orange energy is quite dull and it is predominant. And we're also seeing that hue of purple. So I want to bring up those colors because we're seeing a lot of it. So what can you guys make from that? What does that kind of represent to you, seeing that orange and that purple hue? So when we look at the spectral hue, we should be seeing as much green as possible. So when we see orange, is that a high or a low energy?
Low.
Absolutely.
Emotional.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And again, orange is connected to the sexual and sacral chakras, or chakra. So therefore we know that's a lot of emotional energy. And because there wasn't much in regards, there was no indication whether he was married, divorced, with someone, like he left that whole relationship area blank.
On purpose.
Yeah. Yeah. So I saw that. And again, I'm seeing all this emotional energy, but it's not a vibrant orange. It's a dull orange. So that would indicate to me somebody who is repressing emotionally.
He's actually seeing Stacy. They're sort of in a relationship, but not, it's a weird thing, but he has a problem with, during intercourse of, he apparently is having a problem ejaculating.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't know. I think it's all the emotion stuff going on that he's holding in, that it just won't, it's shutting off.
Yeah, but we got to look at the connections, because the semen is connected to the sexual chakra.
Right.
And so therefore, if we're seeing that mismanagement of the sacral center, then there will be those types of things that could be dysfunctional. So therefore, again, we could surmise, because on an emotional level, you know, he's not as strongly connected. And there's probably a lot of worry, fear, and doubt surrounding that. Because remember, when we see a lot of purple, then that can be somebody who is anxious, somebody who, you know, and it's all physical. We can see it more on the physical level than we can see it in the brain.
Right.
So the body is holding a lot of this anxiety, fear, and because orange and, you know, that indigo hue is that relationship to the emotional side of things. This is somebody who physically has a lot of emotion, but look at the disconnect from the brain. Do we see those colors in the brain?
No.
No. So there's a lot of emotion that's being held in the body, but it's not connected on that mental level. So I always look at the colors above the brain and the colors that are in the body to see if it looks cohesive.
Okay.
And it doesn't to me.
Okay.
So to me, it is that body, mind, and spirit disconnect.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Now, overall, we can see that there is a lot of organs that are resonating that low frequency, because the lower frequency colors are gray, red, orange, yellow. And that is primarily what we are seeing, you know, in the physical organs, is a lot of those low frequencies combined with some high frequencies. So there is a struggle that's going on. In a way, it could be a struggle with the person's spirituality and physical reality. Okay, and we can see that in a couple ways, because like I said, the brain is totally different than the body.
Right.
We can see the struggle of polar opposite colors, right? And we can see the fact that all the lower chakras are weaker than the higher chakras. So again, you know, two different or multiple disconnects between, you know, body and spirit.
Okay.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody?
For me,
Sorry, go ahead.
for me, when I see orange surrounding the person in the body, I let them know that that's a flag that has come up, that it's a warning that they better make some very drastic changes or they're not going to be well. Because you can already see that his root chakra is below 40%. So he's on his way into a not so good situation physically.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And all the physical chakras are weak. So we already know there's a lot of disharmony. And when the root chakra is weak, it's somebody who's not taking care of themselves, because a lot of the physicality of what we need to do to support our body is related in there. And you mentioned something earlier, Cheryl, and that was that this person was doing a lot of cycling, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so I remember early on in my career when I was teaching a class, I had a medical doctor that came through my training, and he was an avid cyclist.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really interesting because his aura looked pathetic. And, you know, he couldn't believe it. He was in shock. He did buy the Biopulsar, but he was in shock. And I asked him, well, why are you surprised? And he goes, well, I'm an athlete. I'm doing all this. And I went, yeah, but you're putting more energy out than what you're taking in. And we have to remember when there's a lot of stress in our life, and this aura is indicating stress, there's too much low energy going on. So this person is being affected by their emotions, by their worry, their doubt, their fears. So right away, that's going to be a catalyst to deprive that person of good nutrition. So even though this medical doctor, thought he was very fit and he looked well, but, again, upon analysis and, talking about what he was doing 700 kilometers a week on his bike. Okay, that's like 300 miles. That's a lot of time on
a lot of stress.
Absolutely, absolutely. But for him, he loved it, but he didn't see it that way. And again, remember, our body feels things differently than what we think. Right?
So this person I see looks like too that they are, in their head with their thoughts, which are not positive thoughts, and the connection to source is not there. That suggests that some higher purpose in his life needs to take place.
That's right.
And self-care.
Yeah, I love that. That was perfect, Kelly, because to me, it is having people to take responsibility, and you've got to help people find solutions. And a lot of the solutions come within what they're telling you. So, to be disconnected from one child, like now, how is his relationship? Is he able to rebuild that, Cheryl?
You know what? I don't know how often he speaks with them. I don't think they have a close relationship. And when he was younger, he did want a son so badly. So then when he found out after that he had his daughter, that he's actually got a son and he's older than his daughter, it's like, wow. And just to say, this guy is, if you look at him, he looks physically fit, like he has no fat on his body, and he's like driven by that. Like that's what he's being judged by. And he's so focused on it. And Stacy keeps telling him, dude, enough is enough.
But that's all he has.
Right.
And that's why, to help him understand that there's more to life than just, one thing. And it has to be emotional, because when we see gray in the heart, is this somebody who's able to love themselves?
Obviously not.
No, absolutely not.
He acts differently in front of people, like he's got it all together. And you can tell, because now that I've been around him more, you can tell he's hurting inside.
Yeah.
Level of unforgiveness here.
Yeah. And remember, that yellow is that shield. That's the color. That's the umbrella. That's how he's controlling his brain, is through that yellow. The umbrella represents the average area of the head. So here we're seeing that yellow, that control, and it's the ego saying, look it, I'm perfect. Right. But there can be that internal suffering that we're seeing. And again, if somebody doesn't love themselves, then it's going to be reflective in that heart chakra area. And I think about this other situation that came up where I had this gentleman, and he had a very similar frequency in the heart. And I started asking him questions, and it was really interesting because his wife kept responding. And I eventually turned totally towards him, because I was facing both of them. And I turned towards him and I said, you love your wife very much, don't you? And he goes, she's the sun and the moon to me. And I went, you never tell her how you feel, do you? No, I don't. So we have to understand that, sometimes people let other people, like they'll please other people, but they're not able to respect and love themselves in the same manner that they're trying to love and respect others. Right. And again, with that shield, then they could be putting up that wall. If I were seeing yellow in the heart, then I know that would definitely be that protection. But because of all the damage that's been done, we can see that that's weak. And I do have another picture of somebody who has very similar in the chest with a lot of gray, except it was even darker. And they suffered a lot of abuse when from the priest.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so we need to look at sometimes the different circumstances that have evolved in somebody's life. But, again, when people are suffering in the heart, it's because they've gone through experiences where people have hurt them. And so that it takes away from their ability to love themselves.
Right.
Right. Okay, well.
You're muted.
Can't hear you.
Sorry about that. I was just moving my cursor and all of a sudden I got muted and it was like, what? How did that happen? But so now let's go into the vitality reading. So the organs, and I'm going to blow this up now because several of you wanted to discuss how to use the biopulsar for the physical diagnosis. Well, here you are. Okay. I'm just going to get rid of this so I can see everything. And earlier I mentioned, just before we actually started the video, the yellow clocks represent the time that the reading is being taken. So this would have happened late at night. Okay, so therefore I think it's usually when we get past 5 o'clock, a lot of the organ time clocks will show up, because in Chinese medicine, every organ has a key time to repair. But as we get into the evening, then the time clocks of the whole body will start to light up. Okay, so we're not going to worry about the clocks. Rather, I want to look more at what's going on.
So can you tell me what the yellow and the white represents?
Okay, so with the graphs, and I'll just take the mouth here. When we're doing a real-time scan, the first few seconds that we see in an organ is the hand getting settled in. Okay, more importantly, we look at the last half an inch, because that gives us the vitality reading of the organ. Now, this green line represents a perfect state of harmony in that organ where it has a reserve. And you'll notice on the side here, there's little strokes. So it goes from 0 being at the bottom of the graph to 2, 4, 6, 8, and then 10 being the top part of the graph. Now with the biopulsar, we can also see the vitality of every organ expressed in a 3-digit number. So when we look, for example, at the cerebrum, we can see that the red measuring line is at the bottom of the graph. Therefore, we can see that we're at 0.39. And when you have the Aura software, you get the number values. When you have the graph software, this is the diagnostic program where you can actually see all deviations of what's going on in an organ to even build a greater picture. And so the graphs give you a lot more concrete evidence of certain situations. But here we can see that the red measuring line is slightly below the green harmony line, and so the cerebellum is higher than the 7, where the cerebrum, as I mentioned, is 0.39 because that's at the bottom. And when we look at the forehead, the temporal brain, the back brain, they're also at the top, so we can see that all those values are at a higher number value. Does that make sense, everyone?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good. So now this is where we can go into more of the psychoanalysis, because we can see, for example, with the ear as well as the eye organ, that there isn't a connection. So do you think that this person is open to hearing anything?
No.
Do you think that this person wants to see the truth?
No.
Okay, so whenever you see the ear or the eye weak, then that gives you some indication, because on a physical level, whatever that organ does, it does both physically and psychologically. Okay, so we would start to have conversations with people in regards to their openness. And I remember one guy, his ear was flatlining, and he had been swimming in a swimming pool, and he ended up with an infection that came in through his ear and paralyzed half his face. And when he came to see me, it was a few years later, so the paralysis was almost gone. There was still a little droopiness in his side of his mouth. However, I was, asking him questions, and he was in total denial. He just, he kept saying, no, 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 no. Well, he showed up in my office within the week again, and I said, oh, why are you here? Because it was unexpected. And he said, my wife made me come back and apologize to you. And because when I went home and I started telling her everything you said, she said, what are you, stupid? You denied all these things, but they're true. They're true. So they had a conversation based on my conversation with him, where he was totally in denial of everything that I was saying to him. So he didn't want to hear what I had to share with him until he went home and he had that second, opinion of his wife to actually validate these things. So when the ears are closed, we have to understand that we're not willing to hear things. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Okay. Now, does anybody have anything to add to that so far?
Well, I found it very
Like, not being
interesting.
responsible either.
Oh, sorry. Diana, sorry, can you speak?
Yes, I found it very interesting that the lungs and part of the brain were exact in their numbers.
Yes.
0.39.
Yeah. And this is one of the ways we look at patterns of consciousness and unconsciousness. When there is an organ that is weak, we start to look if any of the other organs are resonating the same frequency, because that is the same pattern of consciousness, where we can see the neck and the shoulder are 0.35, as well as the armpit and the upper arm. That's a different program. Okay, where the pineal gland, the ear, as well as the lungs, the esophagus, those are 0.39. So that's one pattern versus there's a second pattern of consciousness or unconsciousness. And there are, we have to understand that our cerebellum houses a lot of information from our past. And so therefore, if that is off, then often we repress or deny or hide or are unconscious of some of our programs. So I'm glad to see that this person, has a connection to their cerebellum. So we have to look at some of their behaviors as being, learned behaviors or otherwise. Okay. Mm-hmm. So again, we can deduce that they're not open to hearing. And if we look at that 0.39, as Diana mentioned, the lung is also 0.39 in the esophagus. So, the lungs are about the intake of life. So if they're not open to hearing everything, then we can maybe surmise that they're not open to feeling life to the fullest.
Yeah, low self-worth.
Pardon me?
A low self-worth.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Because, again, the heart chakra is not only about how we love everyone else, it's about how we love ourselves.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So the eyes we mentioned are about what our abilities are for seeing. And sometimes we can find out if people are nearsighted or farsighted, because that will even give us a bit more understanding whether or not they're fearing the future or they're fearing the past.
He does wear glasses. I just don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So farsighted means the fear of the future, and nearsighted is more about fear of the present moment and the past. Okay.
Okay.
So we see the neck and the shoulder. Somebody had pointed that out earlier. So again, there's an absence of energy there. So what can we reflect with the combination of those two organs? And we could start with the neck, because they're a little bit different, but often we'll see them together that they'll be weak. So
not being true to himself, and maybe he has some kind of resentment towards responsibility.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Wow.
When I see that, I think about my grandmother's old saying. She always said, when you carry yourself, hold your head high and your shoulders straight. And she said, and she would always say that when your shoulders are stooped over, yeah, and your neck is not held high, that means you're not thinking of yourself as very much. You're not valuing yourself at all. So hold your head high and your shoulders straight. That's the thing that I remember most when I see something like this. He apparently doesn't value himself very much, and he doesn't have very much confidence in himself either.
Yeah. He may have confidence in what he knows, but not that direct inner confidence or self-confidence.
Yes.
Yeah. And the armpit is weak as well.
I was just going to say, could the shoulder value, isn't that carrying too much responsibility on your shoulders?
Yeah, or not wanting to carry any more responsibility. You're tired of it.
Right. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. And the neck can also reflect the stress barometer between the physical world and the spiritual realm.
Okay.
So again, if they're not connecting, with their current reality and, their belief system, then that could put stress in the neck region. And the shoulders are also part of our atlas. So I think I mentioned in another video that I look at the hips, I look at the neck, the shoulder, the cerebellum, the ears. That reflects a lot to do with the body's posture. So we can see the hips are out. And as soon as the hips are out, then you can see how the neck and the shoulder could be lopsided, right? Because if one hip is higher than the other, then one shoulder will be higher than the other. And it has a lot to do with your equilibrium, which will affect your ears and your cerebellum. So we do see power in the cerebellum, so it hasn't hit his brain, but because we're seeing that the hips, the neck, the shoulder, and the ears are weak, then again, we can make some association that his right brain and his left brain, his right hemisphere, left hemisphere are not in sync. And the right is the emotions, the left is the intellect. So again, if he's repressing emotionally and he's putting more emphasis on his mentality, we can see how the whole atlas could be off.
Okay.
Okay, so that's always a good thing to look. And for those of you who are Biopulsar owners, in your training manual, there's a whole page that goes into the atlas and the organs that are connected to validate that as a reminder. Now, what about the upper arm, or the arm and the upper arm? What can we reflect out of that?
He's not allowing the world to see what or who he really is. He's
Correct.
hiding his
Yes.
true personality.
And that is reflected a lot in the armpit, because I always joke about this, because when you sweat and if you smell, we tend to use deodorant to cover up our body odor. But that body odor is indicating there's something in us that stinks. And that's a reflection of a part of our personality that we don't like. Okay, so when people have a low armpit area, then again, it has to do with self-worth and self-reflection. So you can see that his self-worth is low and his self-reflection may not be true.
Wow.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And the upper arm is, connected to this area of the neck, the shoulders. So there's a lot of stress in the upper arm region, which is about giving and receiving. So again, there's a lack of energy in that area. And now we go into the respiratory system, the esophagus, the lungs. So the esophagus, when we see that low, we can surmise some things obviously on a psychological level, but what might you think on a physical level?
Well, Suzanne, go ahead.
You could have heartburn or acid reflux.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, Diana?
What I noticed, and it kind of comes into play when we get into the respiratory system, is the nose and the fact that it's maxed out. And I remember Martina, even though I can't remember what she said in German, but when the nose is full, there was a German expression for you can't handle anymore, that you just had too much. So that's when I see that, I know that his shoulders and everything like that just can't handle anymore. He's at his limit.
Yeah. And when the nose is high like that, we have to look at some environmental toxins. And he did check off that he does have allergies. So then we can start to, understand with the nose being so active that he could be, allergic to pollen, dust, anything else that's airborne. So this is when an ionizing diffuser could be helpful because his whole respiratory system is affected. Also the esophagus, many years ago, it was interesting because I read an article about how firemen have a high level of esophageal cancer. So that always makes me think about, is this person doing any kind of smoke inhalation?
I think he does smoke cannabis.
Yeah. Yep. And that's what I'm, yeah, that's what I mean by smoke inhalation. It doesn't have to be cigarettes. It can be, marijuana.
Okay.
Okay. And I remember one guy where, literally his whole esophagus was burned because of the amount of cannabis he smoked. So it's no different than smoking cigarettes, because what you're doing is you're burning the lining of your esophagus. And this is why firefighters had a higher potential for esophageal cancer, because they were breathing in the smoke. Okay. And some things can be resultant of, a profession. What does this person do?
He's actually a teacher.
That's right.
I think he teaches graphics or something like that.
Yeah. So depending, there could be a few different things that he could be exposed to, but also when people are indoors all day and they don't have windows that are open, then the air that you're breathing is recycled, which isn't as conducive to your respiratory system, especially if there's, carpeting in the house or, other airborne viruses. With graphics, it depends on what kind of graphics he's involved with. Because that was my first career, I had to learn how to run a printer. And of course, there's a lot of ink toxicity in that.
Yes.
Right. And that's all airborne.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we can see his breathing apparatus is weak. And also, if we look at the thymus gland, what can we deduce from that?
His immune system's low.
Yeah, yeah. So, a lot of things could be affecting him, which is straining his thymus gland, because that is our body's immune system. But there's different ways we can be attacked, and through airborne viruses can be another way, or airborne pollutions or toxicity. So again, we would have to, maybe look at that. And because the biopulsar is seeing things before they actually happen, then, what we're doing is we're trying to prevent anything from, affecting this person at a greater level that can cause more problems. So the thymus is your body's immune system. So this is somebody who could, end up catching a cold or a flu.
Okay.
Okay. And, with all this talk of COVID these days, that's one of the organs that, as you guys know, I'm talking a lot about, because I want to make sure that everybody's immune system is intact, so that way you don't have to worry about the cold and flu season, which we're approaching. And the rectum is flatlining. Okay, rectum damn near killed him. Okay, so what could we deduce from the rectum?
He's holding things in.
Absolutely.
Literally and emotionally and everything.
That's right. Absolutely. Absolutely. That, on a psychological level, people hang on to their old crap. And I read a book one time, and it was interesting because they actually said, and I can't remember exactly what the stats was, but it was higher than 50% of people clutch their butt cheeks. It's about control, because remember, the rectum is the last organ that eliminates. And so when we hold in that area, we're literally hanging on to old crap, old thoughts, old emotions, old beliefs. So this is somebody who needs to take a look at what his core beliefs are and how it aligns with what he's doing in his life.
Yes.
Okay. And then we can see here that the reproductive organs, and there's two reproductive organs that we can analyze: the lower the upper, even though it says lower abdomen, it is the upper reproductive organs, and then over here are the lower reproductive organs. And because he is having problems with, hold on here, you mentioned, yeah, ejaculation, erectile dysfunction, then we can understand that that's because he has no energy there. So because the testes and the ovaries are very connected to our seeds in life, then we can understand, you know, for him not knowing that he had a child for 15 years could be affecting that area.
Yeah.
Okay, because that, you know, again, it's like planting a seed, but never seeing the fruition of the results.
Right.
Right. Okay. And again, that's an area of that intimate relationship. So he has a fear about intimate relationships.
Mm-hmm.
A question, the lower abdomen reproductive, is that the prostate, or is the prostate on the, which one is the testes and which one is the prostate?
So this reproductive organ with the lower ab would be your testes and your ovaries, where the lower reproductive would be the prostate and the vagina.
Got it. Okay, thanks. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. And then what about the hips? We see that the hips are weak. So what can we surmise from the hips?
Not flexible.
Absolutely.
As you say, Suzanne, not hip to life.
Absolutely. So this is somebody, and as we get older, and again, this person is 51 years old. So therefore, you know, they're at the age where, you know, they're probably a bit stuck in their ways. So they're not going to be as hip as somebody who's, you know, younger. So again, that will throw the atlas off as well when people aren't as hip and flexible in life. But with that yellow umbrella, this is somebody who has a set way of thinking and may not be open to thinking in other ways. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to close that window. Okay, so Cheryl, does that help a lot in regards to the physicality and the emotionality and stuff?
Absolutely.
Okay.
For me, because I'm just starting this out, my journey with this biopulsar, and I just want to be, you know, with practice, I just want to be more assured of myself, and I thoroughly appreciate everyone and their input and ways of looking at it. And I think I'm definitely going to be trying to talk to him personally rather than Stacy, because he has a problem with opening up with her. So, and because he wants to continue with this, I think he's sort of like just a little open, but he's not sure, and he's very scared. And I really want to try to work with him. So.
Yeah. And the whole thing is that, you know, we're all connected. We all have the fear of being hurt. And one of the things I tell everyone, but that's part of the journey, is when we lose love and we have love, it fills our heart. And even though sometimes love is, you know, not reciprocal or, you know, isn't maybe necessarily the way we believe it, we still should always radiate that unconditional love. And unconditional love is loving someone with no need to have the love come back. But we always put conditions on love, and so it's not free going.
Right.
You know, so we have to understand when his heart chakra is at 13, there is a lot of fear surrounding that emotional connection. And so, you know, when people are in relationships, this is really, really important that, you know, they have a partner that's going to help pull this information out of them. And because Stacy is the one that's more into the energy medicine, she is going to be the one that has to put her foot down and say, listen, if we're going to move forward in this relationship, we have to be talking about things. So I need to know, you know, what's going on in your thoughts.
Well, she's even told him, because they were in a relationship before and they sort of had a really rocky period and they're sort of back together. But she's even told him, you know, if we don't end up together, I still care about you as a person, as a human being, and I want to help you regardless if I'm with you or not. You clearly are hurting, you know, and I want to help you get through this. So trying to help him break down that, you know, he doesn't want to tell her because they're on a personal level and all that other stuff in a relationship and holding back, trying to break it down, but I don't think it has worked yet. But
yeah. And sometimes you have to ask about people's level of commitment. You know, I had one woman who, her aura was so gray, she was half out the door and she didn't want to take responsibility for her life. And I had to ask her, are you willing to start taking responsibility for your life? Because I can see that you're not. And so therefore, I can't help you if you're not committed. I need you to tell me that you're willing to commit to making these changes. So the same thing goes where, you know, yourself and possibly Stacy have to, you know, talk to this man and just say, because you are so emotionally closed, are you willing to do the work to open up your heart? Because if you don't, you're going to end up in life being alone or unloved.
yeah.
And I think sometimes we have to, you know, be direct with people because, you know, we often candy coat things, and we candy coat things because we think people can't handle it, or we're too scared to talk about the truth. The bottom line is, let's address the elephant in the room. Okay, let's get it out of the way. Let's put all the cards on the table and really, you know, let people know, because even with yourself, Cheryl, I asked you some pretty intimate questions and I already knew what the answer was, just so you know. It wasn't a guess. So, you know, to me, I often will say it in a roundabout way, so I'm not hurting or offending people, but I want to get to the root cause. I don't want to waste a lot of time. You know, because especially when you're counseling somebody, we want to make sure that, you know, they're going to be open as fast as possible. And when I get people that have their arms crossed, I'll actually say to them, this tells me that you're guarding yourself. So either I could do a superficial reading and you'll be happy, or uncross your hands and be open. And, you know, Carolyn, this is what you were saying, where, you know, when I see people hunched over, this is telling me that they're protecting their heart. And I tell people, open up your heart, expand, you know, pull yourself up, you know, and expose your heart to the world, because it's the feeling of love that, you know, fills us. And so when we're not feeling that on the level that we should, then we're not really truly living life through our heart center. So, you know, sometimes we have to direct that. Now, on a physical level, his diet could be improved, because he does eat, by the looks of it, a lot of meat and hardly any fruits and vegetables. You know, and I want to just take this opportunity to talk about the fact that food is a main source of energy for us. And the new pyramid, the new food pyramid, is you're supposed to be eating 8 to 12 fruits and vegetables a day. Most people eat between 1 and 4. So this guy's not getting the fiber in, and so therefore he's not able to poop well. You know, this is why he has the constipation issues. And, you know, he made a note of the fact that he drinks an abundance of water. He says he's drinking eight and more glasses of water a day, but yet he's frequently urinating. So that is also an indication that he's dehydrated. When people urinate a lot, then that's dehydration. We should all be able to hold our pee after we drink a glass or 2 of water. But when people have to urinate, and often it becomes an urgency, then that is an indicating factor that they're dehydrated. Now, again, if we look at the amount of gray and stress in the body, do you think he's absorbing his nutrition?
No.
No.
Not at all.
Not at all. Yeah.
And just thinks by his outer body looking good,
mm-hmm.
you know, he just thinks he's fine and he doesn't need to change anything about it. So, yeah.
Yeah. But again, that's denial. And when people have liquid meals, that's not very good, because if they're not chewing their food, they're not creating the enzymes that are necessary to absorb the nutrition. So, you know, again, we have to, you know, let people know they should be eating food. And when people like to do shakes, I tell them to cut up a celery stalk or 2, so that will slow them down from drinking their beverage or drinking their meal, and the celery will help with the absorption. But because we're seeing a lot of gray in the aura, then this is telling us not only is he in denial and grief, but he's not absorbing his nutrition.
And Suzanne, when was this photo taken?
A couple of days ago.
Is he in a state that requires max?
Sorry?
Is he in a state that requires masks, face coverings?
Ah, good question, Cheryl.
What does that mean?
Is he wearing a mask?
Oh, you know what? I don't know if he's in school, if they're doing the online. I think they actually, where he's in his district, I think he is wearing a mask.
Because he's probably also hypoxic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's going to, again, increase the stress and everything that Susanne said about the immune system. It's going to deplete that even faster.
Mm-hmm.
So again, you know, if I was talking to this guy, I'd be like, hey, dude, you really need to make these changes fast. And I know you don't believe me, but, you know, if it takes 2 other people to tell you the same thing, then maybe you'll come and believe me. But I would try to get to him and help him make these changes before, you know, because that's what I've seen so many people that have orange on the outside of their aura and they have crashed and burned. I can't tell you. I'm like Susanne, I'm probably in the 25 to 30,000 people. And when I see that, I just tell people, look, you know, I'm telling you, if you don't want to be sick, really sick, then you need to make these changes like ASAP.
Yeah. And the orange energy is the imbalance of the water element. And when that orange has been existing for a while, it's not just the water element, it becomes sludge. And electricity can't get through sludge. You cannot absorb the nutrition when you have, you know, that condition. And just so you guys know, he also checked off that he's got the environmental allergies, the food sensitivities, but he also has itchy skin. And itchy skin means too much acid in the body. And acid can be a result of too much stress. And again, if he's denying the emotions, building it up, it's creating too much stress, right?
And all that, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
What's his blood pressure? Because when I see purple, violet in the legs like that from the people that I've scanned recently, it's been either they've been, like he is a cyclist, so he is an athlete, but it also has, because he's not hydrated, it's lower blood pressure. So the blood is having to pump even harder. So it's showing up as purple in the leg.
Straining, right.
Yeah. And we can see that from the heart, that he's not getting enough oxygen in the heart. And so we got to look at different things. One, we know that he's not absorbing his nutrition. 2, now with all this, you know, mandatory mask wearing, I had one medical doctor telling me that he actually has been doing blood work on people who in their profession are wearing masks all day. And he was saying that they do have carbon monoxide poisoning. So we have to understand that, you know, if we're unable to breathe as properly in a mask, then that oxygen that's coming in could be more, you know, I mean, obviously it's not going to be clean oxygen or good oxygen or pure oxygen, you know, so we have to look at some of these indicating factors. But also if he's not absorbing his nutrition, and let's just say that he's weak in iron, then we know that he doesn't have the oxygen in his blood. And so therefore there is going to be that level of heart, you know, the heart having to work hard to produce more oxygen, or, you know, create more oxygen, you know, through the blood flow. So we have to look at some of these things as well, you know, that when people are nutritionally deprived, that there's not enough oxygen in the blood, which again would indicate why we may see that imbalance in the arms and the legs. And because there's a higher energy in the legs, I would ask him if he has restless feet.
Okay.
Okay.
Or restless leg syndrome, or
yeah. Yeah.
The high acidity also, if he's not eating vegetables, the alkaline of the vegetables would balance out the acidity of the meats.
That's right.
So his diet is a mess. Changing that can help some also.
Oh, tremendously. And he did actually signify that for dinner, he tends to have rice or potatoes and meat.
Yeah.
I think that's meat. I can't, his handwriting is a little small, but yeah, meat. Okay.
So would this be a good candidate for doing the salt, you know, the Andean salts?
Absolutely. And Gabriella is becoming an expert on salt therapy. Thank you very much, Gabriella, because I appreciate that. And what Gabriella gets people to do is make that salt brine and sip that salt brine during the day to increase the electrolyte activity and help to pull out any toxins and create a more alkaline state where acid is at too high of a level.
Okay.
Okay.
Foot baths as well. Something like the foot baths too.
Yeah.
Another question is, would seeing the purple, would that indicate viruses, viral overload?
Well, this is another thing that we can just touch on briefly, but when we see that purple hue in the spine, that can be reflective of possibly some sort of highly aggressive virus. And it could be an environmental virus, or it could be even a virus like Lyme's disease. And
or Epstein-Barr virus too. Right?
Yeah. Yeah, so any kind of highly aggressive virus. And because the body is shutting down, you know, and we can see that evidence in multiple ways, you know, again, we're seeing a precursor. And as long as he blocks mentally, then he's not going to tap into that, because I have a very high level of pain. And that's one of the questions I will ask people. Do you have a high tolerance for pain? Because that is indicating that their left brain is governing. And so therefore they'll be neglectful of, you know, the reality, but the biopulsar is showing that reality. You know, you can't hide from it, right?
Not with this tool.
Not with this tool, that's right. So for some of you who don't have the biopulsar that are on with us today, you know, there's different levels of the way we can use the biopulsar. And I think we covered everything. We went through the chakra flow. We talked about the emotional, mental, spiritual component of the aura. And we did talk quite a bit about the health. And when I first started, I didn't do much in regards to the health reading, because that was not my comfort level. However, after you've done a couple thousand readings and you hear people telling you the same thing over and over again, you know it's a reality. And because I have a lot of statistical research, you know, especially when it comes to people who have that heart chakra reading that's under 17%, they've all ended up having some sort of heart condition. Okay, and I had one owner recently, he is not with us today, but Ted told me about a month ago that he had a client that had 3% in his heart chakra, and he forewarned the client that, you know, he was concerned about the condition, gave him a lot of the protocol, but like a lot of people, they don't listen. And that is the hardest thing, is that client compliance. So let's talk briefly just about that client compliance, because I think that's a really important factor. So the client went away. Now, the good thing is the client was there with his wife. So they both had readings with Ted. And because he had, you know, mentioned this you know, heart chakra reading to his client as being a concern, a couple of weeks after the reading with Ted, the guy started having chest pains, and he was trying to brush it off as, oh, it'll go away. But his wife actually said, no, Ted warned us that if something happens, that we need to take this seriously. And Nancy, you know Ted, of course, so you can hear that story firsthand from him. But and so they ended up, I think, calling 911, and sure enough, the husband had a heart attack. And so again, we see these things before it happens. And I can also share with you, some of my biopulsar owners saw an imbalance in their heart chakra and disregarded it and had a heart attack. So this isn't a joke, you know, this is serious. Whether you're, you know, an aura reader or, you know, a holistic practitioner, even when I was doing aura readings, I would tell people to go seek the counsel of a qualified practitioner, that I was concerned that there was some disharmony in the heart chakra, that they needed to take care of it. Now, of course, my first recourse is to start getting clients to do salt therapy. We need to get that electrolyte activity back. And one of my salt protocols would be for this gentleman is to dip a t-shirt in the salt brine and put the damp t-shirt on and wear it for hours. So this way he can start revitalizing his chest with electrolyte activity, because he is so weak with the electrolyte activity. We need to replenish that. And as Gabriella, also shared, she gets clients to make a salt brine. And so this way they can sip on the salt therapy during the day. There are also salts that you can orally take that are in capsule form, but also combining them with our microminerals to ensure the successful protocol of opening up the gateway of the cells. This guy's already drinking enough water, so that's not the issue. It's actually getting the absorption of the water in. That's what's more important. Now, I am a bit of an extremist. I will, tell people that you can be like the average person, where you're going to wait several times to hear it before you'll be active. And I actually say to people, either you can wait and be dense, or you can be one of my star pupils and actually do the work. Because it's like anything in life, when you go to school, if you don't study, then you may or may not get good grades. You might have some natural smarts in some areas that you might end up with good grades. However, often when you don't study, you don't practice, you don't do the work, then we can see that the results will show through by failing in different areas. So this guy, if he wants to continue failing, then we're obviously going to see something happen down the road that, may put him in that situation where it'll be an extreme wake-up call. I tell everyone I want to avoid that. Let's have you wake up today and do your protocol. So I will actually say these things to people. Either you're going to be dense and not listen to me, or you're going to do the work. And when we see yellows and blues and reds in somebody's aura, we know that they're going to be more prepared to do the work. But when we see a lot of emotional colors, then often they go more by their emotions. Oh, oh, I'm going to have that ice cream because, I feel like it, rather than knowing that that's going to contribute to the acidic condition in the body, that can end up resulting with abdominal pain and other issues. So we have to take control. And he even said in his report that he wanted to improve his diet. So what is it going to take him to improve his diet? What is it going to take him to make these choices? And sometimes it's that tough love. We just have to let people know that if they don't love themselves well enough, that we're willing to help them through our love of them as a human being to try to help them. But eventually they have to start doing things themselves. I would have this person do a lot of pink tools like rose oil or, any kind of essential oil blend that has rose in it, because rose is really powerful for self-love. Even some nice green oils to lather on their chest to help with their respiratory system. So definitely anything of the green nature to help with that nourishing of the heart chakra, combined with, micromineral salt therapy, nutritional therapy, that's all great. But we need to have the vibration come up in the green, because if that vibration does not come up, this person will never, ever love themselves like they should and never get past that. Because in order for him to start healing, he has to start loving himself. And love doesn't come from anyone else. It comes from within first.
Right.
But Susanne, I feel like that this gentleman doesn't really have a strong support system around him, or he hasn't through his life.
Well, and I think you're absolutely right. And so therefore, with the guidance of Cheryl and Stacy, hopefully, they can nourish him with, Stacy being a good friend and Cheryl being, the word I'm looking for is sort of like a mentor, right?
Well,
Somebody,
supportive, right.
Exactly. Somebody that can support him.
And I think he respects a little bit more because I'm a nurse.
Mm-hmm.
And it all ties in together.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna be definitely talking to my friend. He has some toxic friends that get him into things that he shouldn't, and he just stays stagnant in this. So he hasn't made any life changes. So this is what it's coming to. So for sure.
I have excuse me, I have a question about this fellow.
Mm-hmm.
So he learns he has a 15-year-old.
Right.
And has anyone asked him how he feels about any financial responsibility towards his son? In 3 years, he's turning 18. Will he go off to college? Does this man feel responsible that he's going to have to come up with money to help put him through college? That could be very stressful.
That's an excellent question. I don't think the mother obviously never came to him and said, give me some money, to support. And I forgot why, if it was a health reason or somehow that it finally came out that he had a child.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember exactly why, but I think he feels guilt and that he lost out a lot on time. And I'm not a racist individual, but he's African American. So the patient is Caucasian. And so I think he has possibly an issue with that too. Like, honestly, I don't know in depth about it because it's something that he doesn't talk a lot about with Stacy because he feels very uncomfortable because I don't think he's comfortable with that whole situation in itself.
Yeah. So if that's one of the elephants in the room, then that should be something that's addressed.
Definitely.
Because, again, it's,
Because the hip also signifies moving forward, having a goal in life.
Right.
And he's flatlined on it.
Yes.
So to me, I'm interpreting that he's not excited. He has a son that, wow, I can help put him through college. He can become something. I can be part of his life to be successful. So to me, interpreting could be financial stress with him, and now maybe learning that his son is also mixed, that he might be really worried about what problems is my son going to go through.
Right. And with everything going on right now.
And everything else on his plate.
Right.
He's just so overwhelmed.
Right.
And this is the whole thing about love too, because love knows no boundaries, right? If you love somebody unconditionally, it doesn't matter about race or anything like that. We all have trials and tribulations. It's about our support that we can give one another, right?
I think it was a one-night stand thing.
Mm-hmm.
So that's, it wasn't something that he was unfaithful and, had a little relationship on the side, for a time period. It was a one-night stand. So that's a lot to deal with too. That one decision, you did it, you made the child, and he had no idea, and he wanted a son, and he had a son, didn't even know about it, and it's a lot.
Yeah. But these are conversations, that need to be done because he has to talk to somebody about that. I mean, you've got to get to the root of it because, again, I know somebody who lived that and age 18, his son showed up at his door and he had no idea that he actually knew he had a son, but he didn't want his son in his life. And then his son showed up at his door. He didn't want to take the responsibility. And I kept telling him all along, one day your son is going to show up. And, it doesn't matter how much you avoid the situation, that son's going to be there. And as soon as that child showed up in his life, he wanted that kid in his life. But again, how do you go through the healing, right? Because it doesn't matter why the reason was that they were kept apart, and both of them have lost out. So both of them need to heal.
Absolutely.
Right? But he's the father, so he has to take that responsibility. So that's a whole conversation that, again, you may have to have with him because if he is totally denying, all that whole emotional component. And this is another thing is, as a parent, we have the obligation to balance our energy so our children don't adopt these these imbalances. And this is why a lot of children end up getting screwed up. It's because of the fact their parents are reliving, the patterns of their forefathers and foremothers without breaking that habit, and it's all about free choice. So that is a conversation that needs to be had.
That would
Okay.
be
So just a question, the yellow, above the crown.
Yeah.
Does that suggest that he's very stubborn and really doesn't even have the energy to listen? And he's so you can tell him exactly what's going on, but if you're that stubborn and toxic with listening, then it's almost like a waste of time.
talking to a wall, right?
Yeah. And we could see that because the ears were, having no energy. So it's selective hearing. He only wants to hear what he wants to hear, and everything else he's going to be closed to. But again, these are the conversations that you have to have, and you may want to list some questions so you're prepared to talk to him about certain things.
Right.
Because I'm an advocate of writing things down, and I want the client to do some healing work too. So, giving him some homework as to what he can do to help self-nurture. And I do have my article on self-love, and I don't know if you guys have seen, but I also have a video on tips for self-love. So that was just released in the past week that are available to share with clients. And I do have the article as well that I'll share with you guys today. Okay.
So this blue, like I'm just seeing this blue there around the
Like shoulders and stuff.
Just in the face and the I'm just recognizing that to be quite beautiful.
Yeah, it is.
And
it is.
So what organ is that connecting to?
That's connecting to the cerebellum. And it is in blue. So again, the cerebellum is about past history. So there could have been some learning that he had from his, his family dynamics in regards to taking responsibility. And, again, if that was sort of drilled into him, he could have some resentment with that.
Because I'm thinking that energy to me looks like you could use that as a positive to help him.
Right.
Somehow.
Because he has so much going against him, it seems that. Yeah, definitely a positive. He needs positives for sure.
But he's got that mental strength, so he can, turn things around with that mental strength, but it's the gray that's going to interfere because he doesn't want to have that, he's not willing to commit 100%. He's got that denial, that grief.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Wow. Okay, guys, we just went an hour and a half. So as you can see, and the client wasn't there. So if you have a dialogue with a client, then it's easy to engage in a long conversation. When you're doing a holistic exam, and you have the client fill out their 5-page client intake form or their daily observation form, highlight the things that you can see that are illustrated in their aura, their chakras, and their organ graphs, so you can make that big picture. Because before we went on air here, that's exactly what I did, is I highlighted the things that I wanted to sort of talk about. And I think we covered quite a bit. Okay, so we're just gonna end today because me, I like my polls. So I'm going to launch a little poll here if you found this helpful. And also moving forward, what you guys would like to learn. We had discussed a few weeks ago that we can do these open sessions where we're reading auras. And I would love to be reading some of you guys. And Cheryl did actually volunteer. And so, we could use Cheryl maybe the next time, or depending on the time factor, we could try to stick a couple people in there. But yeah, I can see that a lot of people want that aura diagnosis. So that's awesome. Okay.
Just the chart, the yellow and white, and I don't know what that chart's called with the clocks.
Yeah, the organ biofeedback graph.
Okay, yeah. So is there a significance to these blocks being in yellow and white?
It has to do with traditional Chinese medicine, illustrating that those organs are in their active time. And so there's a period at the end of our day to early morning that a lot of them are highlighted. Normally we only see one or two. But because it was a reading that was later on in the evening, it looks like Stacy did it when they, you know, probably after they had dinner or something like that. And so therefore it was done later on at night. And I just noticed I put aura diagnosis. I actually meant organ diagnosis. So whether it's aura diagnosis or organ diagnosis, that seems to be the winner. So, but do you guys like the combination of you know, doing the organs together with the aura and the chakra? Did you like that?
I do.
Okay.
It
Okay,
all
good to know.
correlates. It all makes sense. I like it.
Yeah.
It's like bringing it together into one place, you know, a completeness.
Yeah. And I'm open to hearing any of your feedback. And unfortunately, the polls don't give us any room for, you know, having you guys let me know more specifics, because if there's certain things that you want to learn about, let me know and I'll try to focus on them in the videos. And because this was sort of more about the Biopulsar owners, just sort of having an open dialogue, I know for some of you who joined us that don't have the Biopulsar, some of this may not make as much sense. I do have videos that teach about the Biopulsar system itself. This was more geared towards Biopulsar owners, but I did open it up to some people who were interested or who had expressed interest in the technology. So, you know, thank you for being here and learning with us today. And I can see that the aura diagnosis is definitely always high whenever I give this poll. So I'm going to shut the poll off and I'll continue to focus on that. But a lot of the reading will come through the actual dialogue with the client, because the client knows more than we do. And if I don't have the client in front of me, then sometimes what I'm doing is I'm you know, guessing, but without their feedback, we don't know 100%. And thank you, Cheryl, for, you know, trying to, you know, tell us as much about the client as possible. But if we can do some of your readings, then, you know, again, that's more helpful, because then we have the actual dialogue of the client, you know, that we're doing. So, Cheryl, as I mentioned, you sent me everything, so I'm ready to talk about you at some point. Now, depending on what I'm doing over the next course of time will be based on, you know, how often we're going to be doing this. I've committed to twice a month, but I've also committed twice enough to do other courses. So next Tuesday, it's all about alchemy. I'm going to be teaching about what alchemy is and what it means, and I'm going to be talking about different tools and products that are alchemy products. So the whole class will be all about alchemy. So if you're interested, let me know. I'll send you the invite as well. So this way, if you want to join, please, you know, please join in for next Tuesday. Otherwise, it will be 2 Thursdays from now that we'll be doing another Biopulsar training. This will be closed just for Biopulsar owners at this point. But for anybody else who's interested in learning more, let me know. I'll follow up with you as well in regards to more information. So, and then we'll just end it. If anybody has a quick question or two, I don't mind answering a couple questions.
I just want to thank everybody. Thank you very much for everybody's input and your patience in this matter.
I think it was our pleasure, Cheryl. Okay. Well, if there's no more questions, then just hugs to everybody, and I'll be in touch, and we'll see you guys soon.